Thanks for having me. My name's Tim Antonowicz. I'm a master enterprise architect at HPE. I came over with the SimpliVity acquisition about 2.5 years ago and going strong preaching the SimpliVity word. So we're going to talk a little bit about HPE's hyperconverged offerings here, SimpliVity and dHCI. So I'm going to do a little bit of SimpliVity stuff. We're going to transfer over to Dianne, and she's going to run us through. So what I want to talk about from SimpliVity is just to begin with, let you know that we added to the portfolio this summer. Kind of interesting shift in what we're doing. SimpliVity started off with the standard ProLiant Gen 10 offering. Our same SimpliVity hardware that you were thinking, the same accelerator card, 2U, small, medium, large form factors, etc. This is hardware accelerated with the accelerator card. So we've had that for quite a while. What we did is last summer we added a new product called the SimpliVity 2600. This was a software-only offering. No accelerator card. We added 2 additional virtual CPUs to our virtual controller to dedicate to processing our software-defined solution, bringing that in so we're able to get the same performance without the accelerator card, but in the 2U Apollo form factor. So we have 4 SimpliVity nodes in a 2U form factor. This was really great for dense computing, VDI, a couple other offerings. Same analogous capacity as our small offering in the 380, but then we were also able to get very dense here. Well, this summer we kicked it up a notch. We added 3 new products to the family. First of all, we added the SimpliVity 325, which is an AMD-based solution. Single CPU, up to 32 cores, running an AMD platform instead of Intel. This comes in an extra small and a small product, earmarked for remote offices, very small installs, and comes in at a nice price point for small SMB offerings. We also introduced the SimpliVity 380G, which is the standard ProLiant form factor, 2U, but it's without an accelerator card. This is the software optimized only. Software optimized for G. Why we use G? Because it's graphic intensive. It allows us to put 3 additional PCIe slots available in that unit, so you can put multiple GPUs in. Earmarked for VDI or very small operations, but it gave us the ability to really leverage VDI solutions with this G model. And finally, we did the SimpliVity 380H for hybrid. We went back to the hybrids. This has flash drives and hybrid for capacity. This is a dedicated product for backup and archiving nodes only. We're not putting primary workloads on here. This is for large capacity, 25 terabytes per node, and able to add into this so you can put longer term storage in a SimpliVity cluster. So we added these 3 new products this summer to expand the SimpliVity product line. Some people say, well, is it going away? No, we're going strong with SimpliVity. Couple key factors that we use: zero downtime refresh cycles. You can upgrade, change SimpliVity hardware into different form factors with no downtime. That's one of our guarantees. Everything tunes automatically. Global management from that single point of glass. But within vCenter, you can manage the entire SimpliVity operations. Very quick and easy. Everything, all CPU, RAM. It's the best of hyperconverged you can get. A couple things we've added with our latest release. One-click upgrades. We can upgrade SimpliVity software, vSphere, and now the ProLiant firmware, all from the upgrade manager. So we can do it all one click, your entire cluster, much easier, simple, and everything rolls right into that single thing. And finally, global intelligence. We're adding InfoSite to SimpliVity. Thank goodness. Love InfoSite.
So there's a vCenter plugin for SimpliVity?
Yes, the management.
HTML5 compliant?
Yes, fully HTML compliant, HTML5 compliant. It's, we don't have a separate dedicated virtual appliance or anything for management. Everything is a plugin into vCenter, or with our Hyper-V, it's in System Center. So you manage everything right from the same interface. You're going to manage your virtual machines, et cetera, right through there, quick and easy. Question? Yes.
Version of vSphere that we can run currently on SimpliVity?
6.7 upgrade 2? And I think definitely 2, maybe a little bit beyond that.
Is there any issue in running the very most current vCenter server versus, you have a hybrid environment. You've got traditional vSphere, you've got SimpliVity as well for different use cases.
You can run the same version there. SimpliVity will only support up to what's in our compatibility guide, which is online today from version 3.7.10, which was our release in September. We do vSphere 6.7 update 2. Anything beyond that that's more current, we're constantly testing, but we only come out with our interoperability guide quarterly when we release firmware. So it's not published until the December release, but if there's a specific question, we can do a DSR, basically do an engineering request to see what's been cleared up until that level, but it's not published until the software release. Question?
Arbiter, plugin, is included?
Pardon me?
Arbiter and the plugin, is that included as well, the vCenter plugin and Arbiter?
Yes. The Arbiter, when we go up to a firmware version that makes that compatibility, the Arbiter is updated to that level as well, and the plugin.
Only Gen 10 and above, right?
Correct. This is actually Gen 10 hardware, and it's released with the 3.7.10 firmware. So the update manager that's compatible with 3.7.10. Once we get there, now we can do firmware updates as well.
No legacy.
No legacy, because the firmware is for HPE Gen 10. So legacy wouldn't be doing the hardware on that.
Wouldn't work, right.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. InfoSite. Big push for InfoSite. We're really excited that it's coming out soon and available. We've prepped for InfoSite on the SimpliVity side since the spring. When we released our firmware 3.7.8 in April. We put the InfoSite bits into our firmware. So anybody who was updated up until our spring release, we're already ready to start collecting and send to InfoSite. So you don't have to do anything new. You simply, once it's released, we update. We just turn it on, and we're already collecting. So we've had it baked in for a while. We just haven't been able to integrate it in until the final release date. So it's for VMware today. We will expand that out to do the entire portfolio. And InfoSite, it will be collecting from SimpliVity nodes, not just HPE SimpliVity nodes. We're collecting SimpliVity information. So our legacy SimpliVity customers will still be able to consume from a InfoSite perspective for all of their SimpliVity information. How to set it up? Like I said, if you're already on 3.7.8 or better, you already have this in. So what you're going to do when it's finally is open, you go to log into InfoSite, get your token as a customer, then you'll go back into vCenter, and we will be able to show you how. It's a page, but it's hidden, so we'll send out information on how to unhide that page, so that you'll be able to see your InfoSite status. Then right-click, add your token in, and from that point on, you're pushing data up into InfoSite. So we'll quick and easy way to start that collection as soon as it is fully announced. basically how things are working. We have the collection agent. We're pushing that information out over port 433, so it's a secure port, pushing out the information we're gathering. HPE grabs it, and then it's available on our InfoSite. The dirty background here, basically, currently we were always pushing to the ADEXA to pull in OmniWatch, which is our awareness and phone home capability, basically. OmniWatch pushes out to Salesforce, automatically generates help desk tickets. That's going to continue to happen for all of our legacy customers. From version 3.7.8, when we put in the InfoSite bits, we're now pushing using the correct way to do InfoSite, but we're also pushing back through OmniWatch as well for automatically generating work orders. And then we're pushing the data into the SimpliVity data lake. So all the SimpliVity information that we're pulling is going to be from legacy and HPE customers to gather that big piece of information that they talked about earlier about how all this works on the back end. We're collecting that SimpliVity stuff as well, but it's a separate data lake from the ProLiant or the storage pieces or whatever.
What's RDA?
RDA is, I don't remember. It's an acronym for, it's the data collection engine that's pushing the information out. I lost that acronym. I could have told you probably yesterday. So we're gathering the information, pushing out, and then from the InfoSite, as a customer, you'll be able to pull in, log into InfoSite, and then consume the data. What's interesting here is this is the SimpliVity data site. On release, you'll be getting SimpliVity information. The next question people say, well, is it going to collect all my information on my ProLiant servers as well? That's a SimpliVity is sitting on, all the hardware. No. Not on the initial release. Initial release is going to be just a few pieces to begin with. Can you gather information because a SimpliVity node is a ProLiant? Yes, you can, but it's going to be going to different pools. So we're able to roll this in. But basically, we're going to be gathering visibility into the information. We're going to be able to do predictive analytics. We're able to see where your storage is going to be going. And I'm just going to flip through really quick because we got a lot to cover. But basically, be able to pick your clusters, gather your information, dig deeper into what your availability for capacity, et cetera, pull all that information, find out what's available and what isn't from your server support. Predictive analytics, we see where your storage is going to be consumed, go through efficiency. And one really nice thing that we haven't ever had with SimpliVity is we're going to be able to look at how your data is slowly growing and then how it increases. So we'll be able to have prediction as to when we think you're going to need another node.
Is there the distinction between the backup data versus the VM data?
Initially, no. And the reason is we store backup data with virtual machines, so it's really hard to distinguish that on a per VM basis, but we'll be able to tease that out as we gather and continue out.
So the impact of the policies.
Right. The initial rollout, we're only going to have a couple things available, but we're going to add more as those roll out. We're not even going to have to wait for quarterly releases. As InfoSite gets better, things are just going to start popping up and get in. If they're on a 2-week cycle or whatever, more features are going to automatically pop in. But we're able to do find out exactly what logical side on virtual machines are, et cetera. Wellness, all the things that OmniWatch was gathering to automatically trigger support cases or whatever, we're still going to do it. OmniWatch is going to be relabeled InfoSite because it's just going to continue with that feature. Yes?
So there's data that's stored on premises for InfoSite, and then there's also data that's stored in the Insight data lake?
The stuff that's in the system is just a way of processing the mechanism within each node to send it out. Then all the data is going to go over that secure link into HPE's data centers for processing for InfoSite. So we're not storing all that information any more than what we're already storing in a node for diagnostics locally as well.
All right, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about HPE Nimble Storage dHCI. Full disclaimer, again, my name is Dianne Gonzalez, and I actually work for our Cloud Data Services team at HPE. But I'm here representing my brethren who could not make it to this wonderful event. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit of dHCI, and I'll hopefully do it as efficiently as Tim here. All right? So let me actually go back to this slide because it's kind of jazzy. I like the color scheme, but more importantly, I actually like the message to it because it is fairly simple. So hyperconverged infrastructure, we've heard quite a bit about those, especially in the last, I would say, several years. There's inherent simplicity, abstraction of the infrastructure components, and then to boot, abstraction of the management, right? So the idea here is to drive more of a flexible, dynamic platform by giving most of the control that would normally be cross-domain to the actual virtual machine administrator. So it's supposed to increase our time to market. And what we've done with HPE Nimble Storage dHCI, the little d stands for disaggregated, is we've essentially taken a converged infrastructure or a next-gen converged infrastructure comprised of HP ProLiant servers and Nimble Storage on the back end, including the networking. And we've turned it into a hyperconverged infrastructure. We've got some nice marketing here, intelligently simple, absolute resiliency, efficiently scalable. We'll go into a little deep dive about what those mean. But all of the tenets of HCI apply to this platform. When we're talking about simplicity of deployment, you can actually take a dHCI pod and deploy it in a data center within 15 minutes, literally. We do it all the time. We actually do it as part of our POCs. And that includes, from a greenfield deployment perspective, networking, compute, and storage. It's simple to manage. Everything is managed through vSphere. So we have APIs and plugins that go directly into vSphere. So everything from your node management, your storage capacity management, your virtual machine management, all of that flows through a single point or a single pane of glass, and that would be vCenter. Simple to support. It's all, of course, tied into InfoSite predictive analytics. That includes the ProLiant servers or the compute, right? As well as the storage backend, which is Nimble Storage. And then it's simple to scale. And when we're talking about scaling here, when we talk about the hyperconverged infrastructures, because of the nature of hyperconverged infrastructure, they're a bit modular on the scaling. Because of the way dHCI is comprised of a converged infrastructure on the back end, we can actually scale up and out on compute, right? Meaning we can add in any one of our hardware resources into the, let me go back one more, actually. Any one of our ProLiant systems, whether they be 380s or 360s, we can scale up and out, meaning that they can be comprised of different memory makeups. More than likely, just like any other vSphere environment, they will probably be the same. That's what most administrators do, but they could be different, meaning you could have multiple clusters, different memory pools into each one of them. You can also do the same thing on the storage backend, scale up and out, meaning you can scale in performance as well as capacity. And since it is Nimble Storage on the back end, as you're going to see on the next slide when we kind of build the stack up, we can go anywhere from, I want to say, 128 terabytes to almost 5 petabytes of effective capacity, depending on the platform that you choose to run on the back end. All right. So it all starts again with the storage. If we kind of break this up into all of its components, we've got Nimble Storage on the back end. Right now, the mechanism of connectivity, think of this as a pod, right? So even though it is multiple pieces of infrastructure, it's very much managed as a singular unit. So if you think of this as a pod, on the back end you've got the storage. The pod communication to the nodes is through iSCSI, right? But it's not a northbound communication, it's contained within the pod. On top of that, we've got HP ProLiant. These are 360s or 380s, either Gen 9 or Gen 10. We don't have AMD, obviously. This is just Intel-based. Our Intel Xeon processors. So we have up to 2 processors per server or 2 sockets per server. And it's actually up to 6 terabytes of memory with expansion. 10 gig network built into the fabric. The hypervisor, if you're doing a brownfield deployment, we're going to get a little bit more into what this brownfield, greenfield deployment looks like. But essentially, you can build a dHCI pod out of your existing ProLiant servers, right? Which is very important because of the numerous customers that we have that have ProLiant already in-house. So for a customer that's already a ProLiant user, and they may be running virtualization outside of a hyperconverged management infrastructure, right? They can actually build out dHCI internal to their data center.
But that requires Nimble Storage.
Yes, yeah. So it's called HPE Nimble Storage dHCI because right now it's Nimble Storage, right?
So one of the beauties that I always felt was part and parcel to the let's call it traditional hyperconverged SimpliVity architecture was that the storage spanned nodes and that it was all sort of aggregated together. What we've done is remove that as a component of SimpliVity for this scenario and architected it such that external storage with its own redundancies was the
yeah, so in other words, to break this down into simpler terms, right, without all of the marketing overhead, what you've essentially done is you've taken the nodes that are in your stack with SimpliVity, and you've figured out how to RAID the internal storage of each one of those so that it's fault tolerant across multiple nodes.
Right.
SimpliVity does that quite well. And you're exactly correct. What we've done here is we're banking on what's already built into Nimble Storage. So both platforms give you great redundancy when it comes to your storage.
Sure.
Right? It's just that one has a different mechanism of scale, capacity. It's a little bit different when it comes to terms of upgrading based on, and when I say upgrading, I don't mean like an OS upgrade. I mean upgrading based on your capacity or performance needs.
Sure.
Right? One scales more modularly. The other one is meant more for unpredictable workloads. This one right here, right?
I think that's great, right?
So each one of these platforms has its strengths, right? But to your point, yes, both of them have good resilience on the storage backend.
Yeah,
built
that's
through a
not in
different mechanism.
question. I think Nimble is awesome storage.
Yeah.
I just think that my customer will need to look at the use case and try to evaluate what makes the most sense for them.
Absolutely.
Certainly there's value to being able to add compute if compute is necessary, or to add storage if storage is necessary. And in the traditional HCI model, which seems so bizarre to even think about, because HCI isn't really traditional in general, that's not an easy task. That has to be done by adding a full additional
It is a modular type of scale up. Yes. However, in the case of SimpliVity, which does this very well, and I'm happy to pass this back later when we get into Q&A. In the case of SimpliVity, where some platforms, some of our competitors are tied very strictly into that modular upgrade process. In the case of SimpliVity, a module, or let's just call it a node, actually gives you flexibility within the node itself, right? Whether with performance or storage. Now, again, it's kind of like provisioned IOPS SSDs from Amazon. You're still tied to the module limit, right? And if you're in a type of organization or your customers are those that are facing those kind of unpredictable scales, right? Or maybe they need a different type of availability, et cetera, then something like dHCI might fit their needs much better.
Is there anything special about the Nimble that's used in this architecture that?
No.
So it is a standardized
Nimble.
Nimble storage.
Yeah. The only thing that's special about it is that it is essentially built to be the back end of dHCI. So you wouldn't use it outside of dHCI. This would be dedicated to your hyperconverged infrastructure. But for all intents and purposes, it is a Nimble storage array with all of the normal storage array characteristics that come with it. So enterprise data management, the vSphere, vCenter plugins, the vVols integration, all of the things that you would enjoy being a Nimble storage customer and leveraging VMware in that environment, you're going to enjoy as well with dHCI.
Well, that's interesting. So you're, I missed that when I was learning about dHCI from HPE before, because some of the other companies that are talking about doing maybe disaggregated hyperconverged are specifically touting that you could use the storage system for other workloads. But you're saying you really can't. Like this is dedicated.
So you can go into the Nimble array itself and you can create other volumes. But when it comes to dHCI, the reality is that we want this storage array dedicated to the hyperconverged, the dHCI pod.
Okay, so that's a differentiator for HP or different messaging.
and there's reasons for that. I will say the sweet spot for the customer that's already using this is one that, or any hyperconverged customer, is one that's already vested or invested heavily in a virtual infrastructure. So we don't normally run into people who are like, I want to do dHCI plus I want to carve out some volumes for my pizza boxes. That's typically not the case. Most of them have already taken the roll of the dice and gone into a completely abstracted infrastructure layer characterized by the use of some sort of hyperscaler, right? Or hypervisor, not hyperscaler, hypervisor. All right? So going back to the hypervisor requirements, if you're doing a brownfield or building it, you need to have a minimum of 6.5 U2. If you're doing greenfield, meaning we ship it to you already built, you're going to get 6.7 U2. All right? We do require network switches, but again, these can already be in-house. So in a brownfield environment, you can leverage existing switching infrastructure.
So the switches aren't integrated into the Hyperconverged?
So they're not from a management standpoint within vSphere.
Okay.
They're external, right? And then, of course, the management is all through VMware vCenter. So you've got a stack manager, is what we call it, the plugin that's going to be in vCenter. And then you're also going to be setting up the environment using the stack setup. And I have demos embedded into this PowerPoint. If we have time, we'll look at them. If not, I'll make sure to send you the links because they're all available on YouTube. All right. Let's not forget that this whole system ties into InfoSite. And InfoSite is pretty important when you're looking at the management of this architecture for several reasons. Number one, with InfoSite, you have access into the entire pod as an entity. Remember, I told you, even though this is converged infrastructure, well, meaning that on the back end there are separate pieces, it very much is managed as a single entity. So if you go into our InfoSite, this is just kind of a glimpse into the InfoSite login when you first get there. And you go to the menu. When you look for Nimble Storage dHCI, and you happen to be a customer that owns it and has registered it, what you're going to see is the entire cluster managed as a single entity. All right? And you're going to be able to see everything from information about the usage of your host utilization, whether it be CPU, memory. You're also going to be able to see individual VM information, including the cross-stack analytics. You're going to be able to see your compute usage in terms of CPU, memory, broken down, as well as storage. And then from a wellness perspective, we have events not just for the array, but also from the nodes themselves. And some of that was gone over in the InfoSite presentation. This right here gives you a neat look into the cross-stack analytics. What we're looking at here, if you look very closely, and I'm sorry that there's a lot of information, so the screenshot may be a little difficult to see. But what we're looking at here is the individual information of a particular VM. Right? And we are able to see everything from performance to capacity to the VM decays of that VM as well. The VM decays, of course, tie into the storage backend. We've always had that integration. We've just, to use Emerald's words, kicked it up a notch, right? With some new API integration.
So I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Is that going to be all flash a requirement, or is it going to be hybrid as well?
You can use any Nimble storage array you want.
Okay.
From our AF to our HF series.
Nimble AF.
Yep. So whatever fits the need. So and when we talk about the minimum requirements to build a dHCI pod, you need at least 2 compute nodes and 1 Nimble array, including the networking. So at minimum, it's an 8U footprint. It can run as small as an AF20 or an HF20. Or if you need something very massive on the back end to deal with some performance overhead, you can go all the way up to our maximum platforms, which is 60s or the 80s on either side.
And just to be clear, somebody could bring their own everything, right? They could.
Everything except Nimble Storage Array. The Nimble Storage Array can't be reused. It has to come in. There's a switch. There's one little setting that we set at the factory, and it has to come set with that in order for it to be recognized as a dHCI stack.
So that's why that's why the Nimble name is included when you're talking about
Yes,
dHCI,
sir.
because that's the key component.
Absolutely.
Got it.
Yep. Okay. Here you're seeing what essentially it's not just the host CPU usage, but a granular breakdown of the host CPU usage. Again, this is an InfoSite. And what you're looking at here, top VMs by CPU usage and top VMs by CPU ready. It's broken down into essentially a heat map with the listing of your leading VMs on the right. So it could get pretty granular here, right? Data usage and capacity is the same. Notice here we trend, and I don't want to go too far down the InfoSite rabbit hole since you've already had several hours of it. But part of InfoSite is not just giving you what your data is doing now, but leveraging that information to help you trend and be proactive, right? We pass that on to all our platforms, including dHCI. And let's not forget, we now have insight into the actual servers themselves, or the nodes. So messages that you would normally wait for to receive from an ILO or monitor an ILO API to get, you're now going to receive from InfoSite. Fans. Oops, I lost a fan. Lost a PDU. Software updates, right? Any of that is going to be given to you from the InfoSite management plane. And again, we can get pretty detailed when it comes to the monitoring and services and support for your particular services, all the way down to the warranty. Are my nodes under warranty? You can see that in InfoSite, right? And again, just want to reiterate, we can manage this all as a singular entity or a pod, a cluster. So you're not going into InfoSite and digging around a server list to figure out which one of my servers are part of my dHCI cluster. You can actually go to your dHCI menu and actually see your dHCI clusters from one single pane of glass. And I'm sorry if I sound like I'm shivering, but it's cold in here. So, all right. So, before I get started, actually, what's the time check?
You
Because-
get 20 minutes. You get 20 minutes.
Okay. So I'm actually going to skip by the videos. We can come back to them. Or like I said, I can supply you the links. But just so that we have enough time for Q&A, I'm going to get through the presentation, and then we can swing back to the video demos if you want to see them. All right, so I mentioned greenfield and brownfield deployments when it comes to dHCI. This right here is essentially a slide that describes the greenfield deployment, which means essentially everything is built for you at the factory, right? And then by the time it gets to the customer site, the only thing that needs to happen is the rack and stack, the deployment, which involves following our instructions for the networking switching setup, because in a greenfield deployment, all of that is prepped for you and shipped, right? So network initialization, following the stack setup and Nimble array setup, and in 15 minutes you can have this up and running and ready to run your production virtual machines. Brownfield deployment again, the only thing you're getting here is the Nimble Storage array. Everything else you can leverage on site. We will provide you the information that you need in order to set up the appropriate switching for the nodes, and then you can make use of existing ProLiant servers.
So
Yes?
if I had an existing Nimble storage array, could you guys?
No.
Okay.
No. And the next answer to your question is why not, and will it ever be that way? And since I am not the PM, I can't answer that question, but I have heard rumor that that is something that is being looked at. Because we'll get that
She must be
question
using
quite a bit.
InfoSite because she's predicting your questions and answering them even before you ask them. That's amazing. It's like machine learning in the room.
I've done this a few times, so if I have the question, I know you have the question, right? So.
Using the data.
Exactly. I mean, we get
Right.
it. Yeah.
So one other thing I want to talk about with dHCI is cloud. This is bordering on going down a rabbit hole, so I'm going to make this very fast. And stay tuned for the next session on cloud data services for more information. But because we have Nimble Storage running on the back end, one of the things about dHCI is that it's cloud ready, which means you have automatic integration into Cloud Volumes block, right? So if you can imagine in your data center you have Nimble Storage dHCI running, right? You can natively replicate data from on-premises to the cloud right now to our HP Cloud Volumes block service just by configuring replication. And I know that sounds really easy, but what you're essentially doing is you're going into vCenter, right? And you're using the data protection plugin, whether you're using vVols or VMFS, to configure not just your storage, because you can create storage from vCenter. All of this is abstracted to the end user. They do not have to touch the array in dHCI. So you can create storage, whether it be VMFS data stores or vVols, right? When you're deploying a VM backed by vVols from vCenter. And at that same time, you can define the protection policies for those data stores. One of the protection policies that you can define is governed by replication, meaning I want to replicate to another Nimble array. So some of you have asked, what can I do with my existing Nimble arrays on-prem? Well, they can be destinations to replication of your dHCI data, right? But not only can you replicate to an existing Nimble storage array, you can also replicate to the cloud. Once it's an HPE Cloud Volumes block, you can then present that data to any of the major hyperscalers, whether it be Google, Azure, or AWS.
You have to describe what Cloud Volumes is before you jump this.
I told you, this could go down a rabbit hole. So Cloud Volumes Block is an offering in our portfolio. It's part of our Cloud Data Services portfolio. Some of you may have heard of HPE Cloud Volumes, right? So now it's been, because we didn't want to confuse it with our GreenLake offerings, we've essentially added a family name to HPE Cloud Volumes. So now when we talk about the block storage and we talk about replication, we're talking about HPE Cloud Volumes Block, all right? And this is an as-a-service offering, which means if you go into one of the hyperscalers and you want to dial up some of this HPE Cloud Volumes Block for using in your enterprise applications in the cloud, and there's several reasons why you would do that. I'll get into the deep dive of that in the next session. But once you have storage in HPE Cloud Volumes Block, you gain all of the enterprise data protection features and the mobility that is inherent to the service. And it truly is as a service, meaning just like in the cloud, you would, in an infrastructure as a service kind of environment, say I want a particular VM. In this case, what you would do is I want a particular amount of volume space. I want to create this volume. I want it to be this much IOPS, this much capacity, et cetera. But we're able to move data to the cloud. And what's interesting here is you'll notice one of the things that I throw in here in this particular slide is the word containers. Because not only does HPE Nimble Storage, being the backend component of dHCI, support native replication to our cloud service, HPE Cloud Volumes Block, which means you're cloud ready and ready to go. It also has integration with containerization. We've had that integration as part of the Nimble Storage platform now for 3 years. We integrate with any of the major orchestrators, whether it be Docker, Docker Enterprise, right? Kubernetes is as an orchestrator, and by the way, in Docker Enterprise, we support not just Docker, but also Swarm. Sorry, not just Docker Swarm, but we also support Kubernetes managed by Docker as well. Mesospheres. So we support all of the major container orchestrators, which means OpenShift, yes. OpenShift. Kubernetes is the orchestration for OpenShift, but yes.
Sure.
Right, we actually have a reference architecture already out.
Excellent.
We have several of them, actually. So our integration with containerization on the Nimble Storage side has been there for years now. Guess what? You now have it in dHCI as well for persistent data management for your containers. What does that mean? That means we've now not only abstracted at the infrastructure level, which we bring to you in the form of HCI in general, but with dHCI, now you're cloud native, or you're cloud ready. And here's the next part. Because of our container integration, anything you build here translates to anything you have in the cloud, right? So this idea of CI/CD pipelines, not only can you do it on premises, but then you can take them, burst them to the cloud. And again, all of the major container orchestrators. We took that integration a next step, especially when it comes to hybrid cloud. And we announced our partnership with Google Cloud earlier this year at Google Cloud Next. And this is integration with their Anthos platform. All right. And again, on premises, Nimble Storage dHCI. We have that consistent data services plane and APIs for moving data from on-premises to the cloud. What Google Anthos brings to the table is now you are building cloud native on-premises. It has brought Kubernetes to the data center. Runs on validated designs. SimpliVity is one of them. dHCI is the other. So you have this multi-cloud flexibility. Everything is managed from a container perspective via the GCP management console. So your container management is through a single pane of glass. So now we've abstracted not only the infrastructure, we've abstracted at the OS level as well. So now you are concerned with your applications. You can deploy them quickly. Supporting these major use cases: hybrid dev test, analytics, DR, and multi-cloud. And that's all part of just buying dHCI. So whether your enterprises that are using this platform are container ready or not, cloud ready or not, by buying into the platform, they're ready to go, right? Again, we have 2 validated designs for Google Cloud Anthos. I didn't want to just focus on dHCI for this. We also have one for SimpliVity. The one catch is right now, so it's not forever, hint, hint, but the cloud native replication is only with dHCI. All right. And then I have this cute little slide that I was going to close out on, but I'll pause at this point for questions for dHCI or for SimpliVity.
So how do you, when you're going out and selling this, how are you going to distinguish SimpliVity versus dHCI? They come to, obviously if they have existing ProLiants, right, then it makes sense to go dHCI, but what are you touting as the one advantage of the one platform versus another? What advantages do you get with dHCI, for example?
So part of that is actually inherent into what Mr. Lieb, is that how you say his name?
Lieb, yeah.
Lieb was asking, which is questions about storage, how it all works in the back end, how you scale. The reality is when you're using HCI, in your traditional HCI or your true HCI solutions, whether we like it or not, and in this case, because of the way SimpliVity is built, we kind of like it because we haven't, tied ourselves too badly. But whether we like it or not, we're still in a modular type of upgrade format, right? Meaning we have ranges that we can upgrade capacity and compute. And that tends to lean toward a more linear path, which means typically, you might have heard these terms before, a customer that has a predictable workload, VDI. Maybe they want a very small footprint and they need to work in the, how do you call this, the external sites.
Robo. Remote
Thank
offices.
you. I knew it in Spanish and I couldn't think of it in English. And I was like, it's not going to help if I
How do you say it in Spanish?
I was like, stop it.
Robo?
No.
You got to roll the R.
Robo.
I'm gonna roll the R, good try. No, so there's certain use cases where SimpliVity is the perfect match. And then when you're looking at unstructured, or not unstructured, that's not unstructured, that's a loaded term. When you're looking at unpredictable workloads, right, where a customer needs the ability to take into account very varying enterprise applications and their performance needs, as well as capacity needs, then you're going to be looking at a dHCI. Also, and this might sound a little arbitrary, it boils down to user preference. We have, not just with dHCI, but also with Synergy, we have converged platforms. Customers love converged platforms for a myriad of reasons. Many of them are because of the inherent flexibility in the scale, right? Which is something that dHCI brings to the table. Some folks like to have an external array as for whatever reason, they feel that is where they get the better management interface and the greater flexibility, right? So some of it is personal preference, some of it has to do with the workloads, right? Yeah. Some of it also has to do with your resiliency. Mm-hmm. So right now, for example, dHCI has a 6 nines availability. SimpliVity, I think, has what, 5?
5.
Right. And as we talked about with Primera, you would think that one little 9, when you break it down in a decimal, is not a big deal. But to some people, like financials, et cetera, it is, right? So there's several reasons why you would.
Yeah.
So it's
it's
the classic then, just distinction between CI and HCI then.
Yeah.
Only with the simplified management with the CI solution.
Yeah. It also comes down to, like you're saying, the data and the use case. One of the best benefits for SimpliVity is we dedupe and compress everything at ingest. So we're leveraging commonality and leveraging that dedupe to get that data efficiency of the virtual machines and the data that we're landing. If your data doesn't dedupe well, doesn't compress well, we're not going to give you that advantage because we're just going to basically pass it on at a one-to-one level.
Well, Tim,
if you're running a lot of multimedia,
yeah, video,
it comes in, you got video, multimedia, all these different things, comes in, we're going to lay that out one-to-one, so you're not going to get the advantage
nobody
that
can
SimpliVity really
promise
delivers. But if you're looking at dHCI and you have a Nimble array on the back end, you got a lot of real estate there to lay that down that's not as restrictive for some of those use cases. But for about 80% of the workloads out there, maybe 85 or so, SimpliVity can be great, especially if you have a lot of distributed remote offices or you want to replicate around the world or whatever really seamlessly and easily. SimpliVity is a great solution. And you can manage it all from one guy or girl logging into vCenter or run everything programmatically or whatever. It's great. But you know, when SimpliVity was its own company, we could put anything on there. And then like the reality, now that we're a bigger company and there's a lot of other options, we don't have to say, yeah, we can put your security video on SimpliVity, because it just doesn't work well.
Yeah. I mean, so the reality is it's going to come down to knowing what the customer needs, whether it's in the form of availability, performance, capacity, flexibility. All of those things come into play.
Choice and options.
Cloud Volumes and Nimble, are you replicating the Nimble snapshot, or is that just a different replication engine itself?
It's all native Nimble replication.
So I can actually, take the efficiency of the Nimble snapshot and have it up to
Absolutely.
Cloud Volume?
Yes. Okay.
Cool.
All right. We had the same questions when originally, so I came from Nimble Storage, and when we were acquired by HPE, we had the same questions internally and externally. When do you position, at the time, 3PAR? When do you position Nimble Storage? And it became the reality, like he said, of, hey, we have a platform that has the ability to be synchronous, have peer persistent synchronous replication, and has this measured performance. This is probably where we're going to put our tier 1 positioning. It's just knowing the platform, knowing the customer. And then this is over here where we're going to put Nimble Storage, right? So same kind of key here. You've got 2 different offerings from a hyper-converged management infrastructure, but underneath the covers, they are different, and one is going to suit a customer better than the other, right?
No,
it really just
that's where we leverage our field teams, and more importantly, our partners, to help the customer make that right decision as to what's going to fit best for their environment.
And I don't know that you said this, so if I did, slap me down and I'll stop. But one of the things I found that I thought was really cool about the dHCI is that when you implement that, and say if it is a brownfield customer that's running a ProLiant, they get the exact same support once they get into the dHCI that a Nimble customer gets. Mm-hmm. So support with things go right into the queue to level 3, where actually today a ProLiant customer can't get that yet. No. But we provide that through our Nimble support team when it's part of a dHCI solution.
Yes, dHCI is fully supported by Nimble Storage support. Okay. And it is that good, so it's worth talking about.
Yeah, I'm thrilled that SimpliVity is getting InfoSite, because that.
Yeah, and that's kind of
that's
part
the
of the
magic
point.
piece that we've been waiting for, but all the other pieces, went to 3PAR because storage, went to ProLiant last winter. Great. Well, couldn't go into SimpliVity because we need that ProLiant infrastructure and information before we can go to a SimpliVity on ProLiant. So it's the reason we're coming
And even
late.
today, 3PAR doesn't get like the same level that Nimble gets, because there's not as many signatures, not as much goes to like a level 3 guy or lady when there's an issue. But we can do that with ProLiant today when it's in dHCI.
So, in closing, just going to go quickly to talk about a little bit of vision here. When we're looking at all the platforms, and you're probably going to hear this the more you hear about platforms from HPE, is again, our goal here is to drive the simplicity of management and drive everything more towards as close to as a service as it could be, right? So when you're looking at HCI, what we've done is not only have we abstracted in both cases, both with SimpliVity and dHCI, we've abstracted the hardware management itself, right? But we've also gone up a level and made everything about the traditional siloed domain VM administrator experience and consolidated that into a single pane of glass management. So making it easy for them, making them more flexible, easier to deploy things, right? How fast can I get this? Everything's about speed now, especially when it comes to taking applications to market. And speed and time, as we all like to say, is money, right?
Right.
So moving toward anything as a service, again, dHCI right now is cloud native. And with its integration points with containerization, we're talking about building cloud native on premises, as well as taking that data or applications and workloads to the cloud. So the idea here is, of course, this build once, deploy anywhere, whether in the edge, whether on premises or in the private cloud, or in any public cloud. And that's where we're driving all of our platforms. And let's not forget InfoSite Predictive Analytics, which itself is running in the cloud, right? How do I get my data or the health of my data as well as my entire pod at my fingertips so that I can better predict, optimize, all those buzzwords. We hear them all the time, but there's real value to that. That's why he's so excited that SimpliVity is now part of the InfoSite platform. Yes, sir?
I was just going to say, if I've received any pushback from any of my customers on the traditional SimpliVity model, it's been the lack of modularity in the scalability of the architecture. And this solves that.
Yeah.
I think that's a big deal.
And more so, this is all supported through the GreenLake consumption.
Absolutely.
So we're not just cloud native, so we have that
Cloud ready, cloud
cloud
native,
ready.
cloud whatever. We're also
It's cloud consumption as well. So we're bringing that to the table.
Yeah. Nice.